Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. The U.S. Congress opens its new session with a slim Republican majority in the House of Representatives, setting the stage for high-stakes debates on government funding, the debt ceiling, and President-elect Donald Trump's ambitious legislative priorities. With Speaker Mike Johnson facing internal divisions and a rapidly shrinking majority, the coming months will test the GOP's unity and legislative strategy. Joining us today on TVP World to analyze these unfolding dynamics is Scott Lucas, professor of University College Dublin. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you so much for having me.
So it does seem like even though the Trump campaign has won the presidency, the House, and the Senate, it's not all smooth sailing from here. Will it really be as easy a ride as the Republicans has predicted it would be?
No, it will not be an easy ride because for months before the election, let alone now, there has been a battle within the Republican Party, indeed almost an existential battle. Will this party continue to be a party that has existed for 160 years, a party quite often seen as being conservative but representing mainstream political and economic interest? Or will this be a Trumpist party, a party that serves not its traditional economic and political basis, but serves one man in his inner circle, Donald Trump? What we are seeing even today as the party debates who its leader in the House will be, the next House Speaker, is this battle between those mainstream Republicans and the Trumpists who will control the party in Congress. We even have seen in a prelude to today's battle in the Senate, the upper chamber, the mainstream Republicans holding back the Trumpist. So a mainstream Republican named John Thune became the new Senate Majority Leader. And we have seen battles over issues already. When Donald Trump and his unofficial, most important advisor, Mr. Elon Musk, tried to shut down the government last month and tried to ram through their ideas for the government budget and the debt limit, the Republicans said no to that. They blocked that and they kept the government open. So I think it's going to be a far more complex debate, both about how the party goes forward and about those issues, than simply saying that Donald Trump, when he becomes president on January 20th, will be able to get his agenda, whatever that might be, through Congress easily.
All right. So the point of the fracture seems to be the role of the speaker. Can you help us understand why this role is so crucial and how did it cause this rift in the first place?
Well, the symptom of the fracture is indeed the role of the speaker. So the way that America is set up with its checks and balances is that not only does it have the legislative branch, but it has the two houses. It has the upper house, the Senate, and then it has this lower house, the House of Representatives. And the members have to be reelected every 2 years. So you're almost in constant campaigning mode. At the same time, the House is very important because, for example, it's the place where all budget bills, all appropriation bills must start there. So the House Speaker, and he's the person who is the leader of the chamber, this is a really, really important role. And that's why it becomes a contest, not between Republicans and Democrats, but within Republicans, within the Republican Party as to who controls that chair. And just a quick reminder, after the last elections in 2020, the House Republicans overthrew their leader. They overthrew the Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, because the Trumpists felt he wasn't acceptable enough to them. Will they do the same thing to Mike Johnson and throw him out today?
All right, so that is the million-dollar question. And my question also following that up would be, what about a foreign policy position? How will the two factions, if you were mentioning it as a traditional mainstream Republican and then the Trump wing of the party, how will this decide the foreign policy position? And how is that going to change depending on which faction emerge victorious?
I think to take an issue which will be close to Poland, which is the question of the support for Ukraine, is despite Donald Trump's opposition in recent years, while he was out of power, to aid for Ukraine, claiming that Vladimir Zelensky was a salesman who took $1 billion away from the U.S. each time he visited. Despite Trump insulting Zelensky and threatening to cut off aid, Republicans in the House as well as the Senate eventually supported that aid for Ukraine. $61 billion in military aid that was approved last April after a 6-month blockade for the Trumpists. Now, here we go into 2025, probably a crucial period in Ukraine's resistance against Russia. Will Trump try to cut aid again? And if he tries to cut aid, will the House Republicans and indeed the Senate Republicans stand up against him, or will they bow down and say that Donald Trump's wishes are more important than the future of Ukraine?
All right, and you also mentioned the bill being kind of blocked when it comes to Elon Musk's opposition about this omnibus spending bill, where a lot of Republicans have been criticizing the 1,500-page as a pork fest. How can supporters justify including these lists of unrelated provisions in a government funding package, though?
Well, this is the way of U.S. politics for decades, whether you like it or not. And that is whenever you pass a continuing resolution to fund the government, then you'll have additional measures that will be put in. But let's be clear about what some of these measures were. For example, one of the measures that Trump and Musk effectively blocked when they tried to shut down the government was $180 million for research into cancer amongst children. Now, you might object to the way that that gets attached to a funding bill, but I think we all agree that's a pretty noble thing to fund. So, the American government, which is the largest government in the world, it's the most expensive one in the world in terms of the amount of money that it takes, it does have these packages attached to it. And simply to say, we don't like that, which is what Trump and Musk did, that's sort of a diversion. What they were trying to do was, at a time when the Biden administration was still in charge, is they wanted to show that they still had the power to shut the entire government down and then to make it do what they want it to do in 2025.
All right, so when it comes to the Biden administration, where is Biden in all of this? It seems to be like the discussion is all surrounding Trump, Musk, figures that aren't even in office yet. How are they exerting so much power over these politicians when the Biden administration is, supposedly still functioning?
Well, I mean, first of all, let's be clear that even though Joe Biden has been, as it were, a little bit behind the scenes, although he hasn't made that many public statements, he did not intervene publicly in the government shutdown debate, but that was more a matter of politics rather than Biden not being there. If Biden had intervened, congressional Democrats thought it might have made their position a bit more difficult to defend. And indeed, as it came out, they were able to keep the government open. So I think that was just because Joe Biden isn't as prominent doesn't mean the administration is not functioning. Trump and Musk, of course, well, there's two things that make them visible. One is the white noise on social media, where almost every tweet by a Trump or a Musk leads the traditional media by the nose. And secondly, because Trump and Musk have this outsized influence in the Republican Party. In a sense, the egos of these two men have perverted that party and, in a way, perverted American politics. What that means when Trump gets into the White House, will he continue to use Musk? Will Musk continue to use Trump? Will the two men continue to work together? Will it effectively hijack the Republican Party? Those are all open questions, which probably lead to the biggest question of all. Will the U.S. system be able to take the strain when you have a man named Donald Trump and Elon Musk who are effectively wannabe autocrats trying to exert power?
And going back to the question that we were discussing about the fracture of the party, how likely do you think it is for GOP to advance a unified legislative agenda now, given the current fracture that we're looking at right now?
Well, I mean, I'll just go back to the first term of the Trump administration. I can only recall one major piece of legislation that was passed in Trump's first term. It was the giant tax cut bill, which largely benefited the wealthiest Americans in December 2017. Beyond that, I would be hard-pressed, and I think your viewers would be hard-pressed to name a significant piece of legislation. Instead, what Trump would do is he would rule through executive orders. So if you think about the most provocative policies, the so-called Muslim ban in the first week of his administration, that tried to block people from mainly Muslim nations from coming into the United States, the policies regarding migrants and asylum seekers that split families, took children away from their parents, put those parents in detention centers, the so-called wall with Mexico. Those initiatives weren't passed through Congress. So, the issue here is not really will the Republicans pass legislation that Trump wants. It's how much Trump will try to use those executive orders to try to overtake and outflank Congress. And will Congress let him get away with it?
And with all these infighting going on, do you think this also creates opportunities for Democrats to influence critical legislation in one way or another?
I think the Democrats, and I'm not a Democrat, but I think they should act like the adults in the room. I think it'll be difficult for Democrats to get legislation through because they do not control either the House or the Senate. The Republicans have both those houses by slim margins. And so if the Democrats advanced a policy option, they would have to get some Republicans to join them. But I think the Democrats have to do more than simply waving their finger and saying, no, 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 no. I think they have to reach out across the aisle, talk to some of those more moderate mainstream Republicans about what will be in America's interest. Sometimes what is in America's interest will be to stop what Trump proposes or his inner circle proposes. Sometimes it may be Democratic support for legislation from those moderate Republicans. And perhaps the most important thing is Democrats need to work with Republicans to maintain U.S. agencies, because the broad agenda of Trump and his advisors is to make those agencies bend to his will, whether it's the Justice Department, the FBI, the Treasury, the Defense Department, or the State Department. And that defense of U.S. agencies is going to be vital, which means Democrats need to, with Republicans, say it's the U.S. system, which matters more than one person named Trump.
All right. And last but not least, do you think that this infighting eventually will make it harder for Trump to pursue his agenda going forward?
I think the problem with the question with respect is that what we usually think of a presidential agenda is we think of very coherent, laid out policies that are tied to, I would like this bill, I would like that bill passed. That's not the way Trump operates. Trump operates by making announcements on social media, by almost issuing commands. So, for example, what happens if he does follow through on that threat to deport millions of migrants and asylum seekers? Can he get away with it? What happens if he threatens to shut down the government again, and the government will face another key decision on funding in March? What happens if Donald Trump threatens to pull out of NATO, an issue of importance to Poland as well as to the United States? Those are all decisions he could make without going through Congress. And that's why you can't simply say the Trump agenda in the normal way we think about how a president tries to run in his office.
All right. Thank you so much for breaking all of this down for us. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the input and insight. Thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thanks to you and your viewers.
Appreciate it. And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.